The Mouth in the Void. On April 12, 1983, James Ridley awoke from a 67-day coma at St. Mary's Hospital in Detroit, screaming in terror. His cries echoed down the sterile hospital corridors. The mouth! The mouth in the void! It's the mouth in the void! Nurses rushed into the room, only to find the 34-year-old auto worker wide-eyed and trembling, clutching at the hospital bed sheets as though he were trying to hold on to reality itself. The mouth! The mouth in the void! Ridley had suffered severe head trauma in a factory accident, leaving him in a state doctors described as unlikely to regain consciousness. Yet, against all odds, he did. What followed his awakening would confound neurologists, philosophers, and theologians for decades to come. During his initial evaluations, Ridley was agitated and incoherent, muttering cryptic phrases about the true reality and the thing behind it all. Dr. Sarah Klein, the neurologist assigned to his case, attempted to calm him down with gentle questioning, but nothing could steady his trembling hands or slow his panicked breathing. You have to listen to me, Ridley said, his voice hoarse from overuse. We're cattle. Everything, it's just a feeding pen. Dr. Klein, though skeptical, leaned in. What do you mean by feeding pen, James? Can you explain? Ridley's eyes darted around the room as if searching for something unseen. It's out there, he whispered. Something bigger than galaxies, bigger than time itself. It keeps us distracted, keeps us dreaming while it feeds. What is it, James? Ridley shuddered. The mouth, the void. It's alive and it's endless. It doesn't need flesh. It feeds on us, our thoughts, our dreams, our hopes. Everything we think is ours. It's just the scraps it lets us keep to be quiet. Dr. Klein exchanged worried glances with the nurse. Ridley's words were hauntingly vivid, though they could easily be attributed to hallucinations or post-coma delirium. But as the days passed, Ridley's lucidity returned, and his accounts only grew more elaborate. I saw it, he said during one of their sessions. When I was gone, I wasn't asleep. I was there, in the void. It showed me everything, the gears behind the curtain. We're all connected, like veins to the heart. This life we live, it's not real. It's anesthesia to keep us from feeling the truth. Dr. Klein, intrigued despite herself, asked, if this reality is anesthesia, why did you come back? Why are you here now? Ridley's face crumbled, tears streaming down his cheeks. I begged it to let me back in. I couldn't bear it, the scope of it, the horror of knowing. Out there, you're alone, truly alone. There's no up, down, no end, no beginning, just it, watching, consuming. His words sent chills through the staff who overheard them. Adding to the mystery, Ridley's EEG readings were unlike anything the medical team had ever seen. His brain activity oscillated wildly, suggesting that he was simultaneously in a state of deep sleep and heightened awareness. An impossible contradiction. Neurologists from across the country reviewed his case, but no one could offer definitive explanation. Over time, Ridley's demeanor shifted. He stopped describing the void in frantic bursts and instead spoke of it with a strange calmness, as though he had resigned himself to its existence. It's always there, he told Dr. Klein one afternoon, gazing out the window. Even now, I can feel it watching, waiting. It happened in the early hours of May 3rd, 1983. 3 weeks after regaining consciousness, security footage captured him exiting his hospital room at 3:27 a.m., barefoot and wearing his hospital gown. He moved with purpose, his gait steady and unhurried, as though he had been guided by an unseen force. He bypassed the nurse's station without so much as a glance and made his way to the hospital's main parking lot. The final camera recorded him standing in the center of the lot, staring up at the night sky. He stood there for nearly 5 minutes, perfectly still. Then all of a sudden, the footage begins to cut in and out, and they see what seems to be a large flash of light at the top of the screen. When it comes back, just seconds later, Ridley is gone, nowhere to be seen. After searching the hospital grounds, security would notify local PD. When the investigators reviewed the footage, they noticed something chilling in the final frame. Ridley's expression was one of absolute recognition, an almost serene understanding, as if he had finally reunited with something he had known all along. After a few days of searching, they deemed him a missing person, eventually pronouncing him deceased. His body was never found. The empty parking lot where he vanished became the subject of local lore, with some claiming to feel an inexplicable sense of dread when passing through it. Dr. Klein, haunted by her encounters with Ridley, left the medical profession the following year. She later wrote in her unpublished memoir, James Ridley spoke of truths we cannot comprehend, and horrors we are not meant to face. Whether his visions were delusions or glimpses of a greater reality, I cannot say, but I often wonder if there is something watching us from the void. How long will it be content to simply watch? Over the decades, Ridley's story has become subject of debate and speculation amongst fringe theorists and paranormal researchers. Some claim his words were the ravings of a damaged mind. Others believe he was of sound mind, one of the few to get a glimpse of the mouth of the void. A day in the Mystery Flesh Pit. The year was 1986, and the Mystery Flesh Pitt National Park was at the height of its popularity. Families flocked from across the country to marvel at the bizarre, living wonder nestled deep in the heart of Texas. The idea of walking through a giant, living organism, a creature so massive that its anatomy formed caves and tunnels, was irresistible to thrill seekers and naturalists alike. Among the visitors that day was the Henderson family. Joe, a stern but adventurous father, Mary, a cautious mother, and their curious 10-year-old son, Tommy. The parking lot buzzed with activity as rangers in khaki uniforms directed cars into neat rows. Above the park entrance hung a large neon sign, Mystery Flesh Pitt National Park, nature like you've never seen it. The lettering flickered slightly, giving the impression that the sign itself was alive. The Hendersons approached the entrance where a cheerful guide handed them a brochure. Inside were vivid diagrams of the pit's anatomy and a list of attractions, including the amniotic thermal springs, the esophageal observation platform, and the popular core vent ascension ride. A warning at the bottom of the brochure read, "Visitors are reminded to remain with their guide at all times and avoid unmarked passageways. The pit is a living organism, and deviations from marked paths may result in injury or death." "Stay close, Tommy," Mary said, gripping her son's hand tighter, but Tommy's eyes were already darting to the towering structures in the distance, enormous metal scaffolds that descended into the mouth of the pit, holding platforms and elevators to lower visitors inside. He could hardly contain his excitement. The first stop on the tour was the esophageal observation platform. The family crowded onto a glass-walled elevator with a dozen other tourists, their guide narrating the descent. "This area here," the guide said, pointing to the enormous, fleshy walls around them, "is the upper digestive tract. The pit's mucous membrane secretes a protective layer, so don't worry about touching the walls, but try not to lean too close." Tommy pressed his face to the glass, staring in awe. The walls pulsated rhythmically, faint veins glowing with a bioluminescent light. Occasionally, a ripple of movement passed through the tissue, as if the creature were aware of its visitors. "How deep does it go?" Tommy asked, his voice full of wonder. "No one knows," the guide replied. "We've mapped about 30% of the pit so far, but beyond that, the creature becomes, well, less hospitable." The platform eventually came to a halt, and the group stepped onto a sturdy bridge spanning a yawning chasm. Below, thick, viscous fluids oozed through canals like blood through veins. The smell was overwhelming, a mix of copper, salt, and something faintly sweet. "This is the pit's primary digestive canal," the guide explained. "It's completely dormant, mostly. But remember, the pit is a living creature, so we ask that no one throws objects or shout too loudly. Any strong disturbance might activate its immune response." Next, they visited the amniotic thermal springs, a popular spa-like attraction where pools of warm, nutrient-rich fluid were said to have healing properties. Tourists soaked their feet or leaned down to touch the gelatinous surface, marveling at its soothing effects. Mary wrinkled her nose but dipped her toes onto one of the pools. "It's oddly relaxing," she admitted. Tommy, however, had grown restless. While his parents lingered near the springs, he noticed a small, unmarked tunnel nearby. The opening was just large enough for a child to squeeze through, and a faint blue glow emanated from within. His heart raced with curiosity. Against his better judgment, he slipped away from the group. The tunnel felt alive beneath his hands, the walls warm and slightly elastic. As he crawled deeper, the glow intensified, revealing strange, pulsing orbs embedded in the walls down below. They looked like eggs, quivering faintly with some internal motion. He reached out to touch one, and it shuddered violently. A low rumble echoed through the tunnel. The walls began to ripple, and a thick, viscous fluid started seeping in from the floor. Panic gripped Tommy as he realized the tunnel was constricting, forcing him to crawl backwards. His shouts were muffled by the fleshy walls, and the faint blue glow began to fade. Meanwhile, back at the thermal springs, Mary noticed her son's absence. "Tommy," she called out, scanning the crowd. When there was no response, panic set in. "Joe, where's Tommy?" The guide quickly organized a search party, but as they moved through the marked paths, a deep vibration coursed through the pit. "What was that?" Joe asked, his voice tense. The guide's cheerful demeanor faltered. "It's likely an immune response. The pit can sense disturbances, especially in uncharted areas. We need to move quickly." Tommy was now completely trapped. The tunnel had constricted around him, and the quivering orbs had burst, releasing swarms of tiny, translucent creatures that clung to his skin. Their touch was cold and sharp, as though they were feeding on fear. He screamed as the walls pulsed violently, and then, just as suddenly as it stopped, a massive, gaping orifice appeared ahead, lined with rows of glistening, razor-like teeth. It wasn't a mouth, not exactly, but something far worse. The mouth in the void seemed to materialize in the depths of the pit, an unspeakable presence, aware of its intruder. Tommy's mind went blank as a wave of overwhelming recognition washed over him. The search party eventually found him hours later, unconscious but unharmed, near the entrance to the park. He was curled into a ball, his eyes wide open but unseeing. Doctors later said it was shock, but no one could explain the strange markings on his skin, like the faint impressions of teeth. The Hendersons left the Mystery Flesh Pit that day, never to return. Tommy spoke little of what had happened, but at night he would awake screaming about the mouth and the watchers. They knew he could see, and he knew what they were there for: consumption of mankind. Years later, while in high school, Tommy Henderson would vanish off the face of the earth. Nobody knew exactly what happened to him, but many believe he met the same fate as Mr. Ridley back in 1983. The park remained open for another 2 decades, but whispers of incidents like Tommy's grew more frequent. When the catastrophic 2007 gastric event finally forced the pit to close, few were surprised. But then, many had begun to believe the pit was never meant to be explored, that its mysteries were better left undisturbed. So I hope you enjoyed those 2 stories. Kind of a different format for me. A lot of times I'll come across stories that don't quite get the full 8 minutes, so I'll just throw 2 together. I think it's kind of cool. Mouth of the Void really made me think about the Mystery Flesh Pit for some reason. I kind of was able to tie those 2 together. If you like this content, if you like my storytelling, please make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you get notified every time I post. I'm going to continue to do a lot of storytelling. It seems to be what hits, and it seems to be what people like, and I actually enjoy doing it. So make sure you comment, share, interact with my posts as much as you can so we can get into the algorithm, and let's get this channel popping, y'all. I know we got what it takes. I'm gonna get back to some of the Navigator stories also here very soon, so stay tuned for that. Hope you enjoyed, and if you're into this type of stuff, go ahead and check out some more of my content. One I recommend is the 4-hour tape. Very, very good video. And another that I recommend is the Antarctica spiders. Those are awesome too. Stay in the love, stay in the light, be kind to others. I am out.